we watched BNA.
Yes.
It's safe to say that like a furry has infiltrated like the top level brass of Netflix, right?
No, probably not the top level. I don't think the top level even is aware what goes on in Netflix. I would say the program director of Netflix is like, look, I have a thing about furries, and I'm just gonna let that sort itself out in the timeline.
like it started with Bojack, but then anime happened. So we had Aggretsuko and Beastars and BNA, and I haven't even caught up with all because there's also I haven't watched it yet, but there's Dorohedoro, where the main character is the lizard man, and it's like I don't even know if I'm missing more.
There's like a couple of, I guess you could call them furry, but like the focus isn't a furry, but there's like these like weird kids surviving an apocalypse shows. There's like they had this weird little stint where they made like four of these shows where kids survive apocalypse.
Oh, like one of them rapid fire.
And one of them has talking animal people in it. So I was like, oh, okay.
Oh yeah.
Kim,
the one that looks like it's like the character's a fairy or something. I haven't watched it. I haven't watched it. I just
God, I watched like one episode and I was like, okay, this definitely isn't.
I think it was on my list. Here. It's
it was something Kim. That's all I remember.
Kipo. And the Age of the Wonder Beasts. You're right. That's another one. Yeah, that's Kipo. A world where the animal people have taken over the world, and everyone's and all the remaining humans are like hidden away and secret. And I think the main character is a hybrid, which was created in like a lab or something, which is like actually like really on the nose for today's podcast, I guess. But there's literally more than I could even keep track of. It's just animal people are all the rage right now, evidently, which like I mean, fun to watch. Admittedly, Bojack. In some way,
it's different.
Well, I think about like Bojack, where I'm just like the animalness, aside from for specific gags, wasn't the most important thing most of the time. But it just made the show more entertaining to watch instead of just watching a bunch of human cartoons. The whole thing. There's kind of like some fun with like you can, if nothing else, you just get to spend some time being like spot the animals and like there's a fucking, I almost said chimichanga, that is a chinchilla or something like that. Like there's a little bit of that in BNA. I'm like, oh, okay, already like secondary character is a wolf, and then like okay, that gangster's the hyena, and the mayor's assistant is the pangolin. All right, that's my list. Found my favorites.
I mean, the OP. Literally, like the OP of the show literally just like, you remember these characters, they're animals, these characters, they're animals. Like it just kept showing you the animal version of every character, and you're like, oh, thanks.
So to go into opinions, I'm so mixed on this show. I kept having things I liked here and there, but there was so much going wrong all the time. Like if we go through like the list of things, like Bojack, Aggretsuko, Beastars. I feel like I'm forgetting something else, and like Zootopia and whatnot. Like there's like this might be like the worst version of this, and there's always the split, which is that they're always like, okay, what are the animals going to mean? What are they going to represent in each thing? And in Bojack, the animals were just a sliver of the character's personality coming out, and them being animal people was not the plot of the show. But then usually, like there was like weird hints of it here and there, but like it wasn't about like there wasn't like people versus animals or anything like that, or like what does different animals like mean exactly. It's sort of like it was mixed
animals, but it was like a subtext of it, though that's the lead-in they give you to the show, which is really really mixed messaging.
Well, I said for Bojack.
For Bojack.
Sorry. BNA. I was like in Bojack, them being animals didn't really matter. It was just like just like a reflection of their personalities. Whereas fucking Zootopia goes full on racism, like straight up full on racism metaphor, and it's been done to death about how like there's like 100 reasons why it was clever and why it was horrible the way they did it. Like there's a bunch of problems, but like For me, the highlight of the whole movie is when Judy gives the speech, when like the press speech, and where she kind of ends up betraying her friend with what she ends up saying, because she falls into like the kinds of like rhetoric that's insidiously in these kinds of conversations, and there's like the betrayal there was like one of the better handled things of that. But then you have like what Beastars, it's like less about straight up racism, and a lot of it's instead a lot about this sort of take on like sexual dynamics. Like obviously it goes back and forth, like it muddies the metaphor a lot, because there is the explicit or there's the herbivore versus carnivore thing, but then there's also like the coded male versus coded female thing, and when they go to the predatory stuff, because the predator stuff's all like very, very intermixed with sexual stuff throughout it, and like they're doing something very specific with that. Aggretsuko, once again, just doesn't matter that they're animals. It's just it's a Bojack again, where like they might have an animal joke, but they're not. It's not about animal people. They just are animal people.
For context, it's by the people who made Hello Kitty.
Yeah, they're just office workers and people struggling with like Japanese expectations of society and stuff like that.
It's just turning something mundane into kawaii. Where you're like, look, now they're little animal people doing office work, and you're like, oh, like, that's the premise.
And to some extent, that's like it's like almost good news when the anime turns out to not be about racism, because you're like, because there's a part where there's like the clutch where you're like, how are they gonna do? Like, how good are they? How good is the Japanese studio gonna do about like the racism allegory? When it's kind of like a homogenous society where it's like I don't know if the perspective's always there to say a lot about it.
It's really weird though, because there is that like Aggretsuko really has that level of, oh, we're gonna put specific animals with specific personalities though.
Yeah.
Like
there's
like
an essentialism aspect
as a
pig
to it. Is not an accident. They didn't like, oops, stumbled upon that pairing. Like the hippo being very gossipy. Like there's a lot of like, oh, I get the parallels you're making to real world situations, but it never like, it doesn't try to challenge those. It's not there to like make a social commentary. It's just like, doesn't it make sense? And you're like, yeah.
Well, it's kind of a mixed thing, because like they're representing personality types as animals, but the animals themselves aren't usually like a racism thing, because like there's not really a lot about like the oppression of hippos, because they literally don't exist in human society in that faculty. Like that's not how it works. Yeah. So it's instead like it's just the idea of expressing somebody via like these. It's like, I mean, making animal people almost feels like a similar exaggeration to how like anime art styles work, where you just take characteristics and you exaggerate them. Like it's a different form of that, where it's like instead you're going to express them as an animal. Like, oh, this character's slimy, so they're a weasel or something like that, which basically happens in this, But yeah, BNA though fucking dives straight the fuck in to racism.
BNA doesn't
just straight the fuck in.
Regards.
And
it was 30 seconds.
It was kind of everything I feared. Because like it doesn't have a lot to say about racism, but it made the whole plot racism, and it's like it was everything I was worried about, and I was immediately like bummed out that this is where we were going with this, because I kind of wanted to just look at the cool characters and have a dumb anime plot play out or something, but they go heavy into racism, and oh no, it's just not working.
I have to say my favorite part is about the racism part, which sounds like a terrible lead-in sentence, but I appreciate that it started out going, okay, we're gonna try to address the dynamics between humans and beastmen, and how that's an allegory for racism. You're like, oh,
that goes like out the window.
Near the end, it goes, what if we upgraded our racism? It's like, why did you like tone it down? It's like you're already failing the first racism. Don't bring another one in. And you're like, no, we're gonna go bigger. And it's like,
it gets so convoluted that it's really hard to even try to trace the metaphor anymore. Even though it's like barely a metaphor, it's mostly just explicit. But like,
yeah.
There's a temptation to go straight into spoilers, so we need to like try to get our consensus opinion first, then we can go episode by episode on like the mess of it specifically. But like, it's pretty. It's a pretty show.
It looks great. It looks there are some very very loose interpretations of things sometimes. Like you'll definitely see some funny, weird animations.
Some strange frames here and there.
Yeah. The world is not interesting, which is unfortunate. Yeah. There's like a tiny little nugget where it's like, here's the slums, and I'm like, wait, there's slums in a
there's a bunch of episodic
there's a bunch
of episodic things in like the first half of the season that keep establishing new ideas that mostly raise 12 new questions for everyone they answer, and then they move on to the plot in the second half and just dump all of those storylines, which almost all of those were like raising an entire concept and then throwing it out the window in one 20-minute episode. So it's just
the show needed 12 more episodes. It needed a whole nother set of episodes to make this work.
It needed to pick one thing. Either pick. I think they needed to pick the main plot, which maybe don't do that because it was bad, or slice of life Beast City, which is what it does for like half a season. Like it does a bunch of single episode little slice of life things for like half a season, and then it just it's actually we fucked up because schedules didn't work out yet, but we watched all the Paranoia Agent, and this is actually a thing I wanted to bring up with about Paranoia Agent. Is it's one show for half a season, then a different show for the other half of the season, because the first half's episodic and the second half is like time for the plot, and you're like, oh, we're changing gears here, and I'm kind of losing it. But
someone like cranks it into a different gear, and you're like, wait, we were in a first gear? What happened?
and like this. On the race stuff, it brings up a bunch of really worrying ideas and then doesn't really disregard them. It kind of proves them right and then lets them sit. And it's like, we have to get to that in the actual spoiler part, but in detail. But like, it's just like, oh, fuck. You just advocated for a really distressing thing. And you didn't really unadvocate it by the time the season was over.
No.
And, and also, they keep hinting at like secrets and reveals and like mysteries and tensions and true, like things about like what people's true intentions and like sides are, and you can always tell where it's gonna go. But they'll like reinforce the secret or the question for like 4 episodes or more before they finally reveal the answer. And I'm like, I got it. I got it immediately. This is annoying. And
there's a really big issue of saying something and you're like, oh, okay, I get it. And they go, say it again. You're like, no, I got it. It's like, say it again. It's like, okay, stop. And then the reveal is like, isn't that, we did it. And you're like,
I got it.
Yes, I know.
Yeah.
There's a lot of fall flats.
Did you mean to not tell me that already?
Yeah.
Because they basically already told me these things.
There's some parts where,
they basically explicitly tell you stuff. What? They explicitly tell you like season end twists in the first episode unambiguously, and then reveal it later like it's a surprise. And I'm like, wait. I get that the characters keep not knowing it somehow, but like I super knew already, and I barely understood the universe. Like you barely understand the universe, and you already know the answers to twists, and then they just keep filling in the universe, and then they're like, and now the twist, and it's like, no, I knew that. I knew that before anything. That's the first thing I knew. The other thing is,
oh no, wait, this is the bullets you loaded? Oh, I thought you had like other bullets.
Like, oh no, that's how the season ends. And then you have the fact that like you want, like, I've seen some Studio Trigger, not nearly as much as you have, but like I've seen Redline, and like I'm like here for like the cool animations and action sequences and so on. Which also Redline was also like a thing where like beautiful all the way through, but several plot points I was like, what is fucking happening in this movie? Like the super weapon shit, or the final frames of the entire film where it just cuts to credits. And I'm like, wait, what? That's how it ends?
Yeah, there's like
this.
My favorite part of Redline is you're there for a race that feels kind of like a mix between pod racing and Burnout Paradise. And all of a sudden you have like a baby in the middle of a race that's a massive weapon of destruction, and you're like, what the fuck is happening here?
There's like kaiju that aren't in the race, and
you're like, what?
This is strange storytelling.
And then it ends like everyone's good, and you're like, wait, what?
Like I was having fun, but I ended Redline with like this feeling of like, Do I need to watch a video essay that explains what this meant? Like, is this all like, am I going to find out this is like, actually in 1967 in the revolution of blah, blah, blah in Japan, this is like all this iconography is like super important and evocative about something that I have no context for?
No.
Or is it just a crazy kaiju baby? Like,
Redline's just let's have fun, and the artists are free to do whatever they want.
But like, I'm here for I'm here. I want to see these cool action scenes and these cool sequences, and they keep teasing me with the idea that they're going to happen in BNA, and sometimes they do and just happen, and sometimes they're over instantly. But other times, in the worst case scenario, it's like a 5-minute action scene that features like 3.5 minutes of exposition during the action scene. So it's like you're watching like a 1-minute action scene spread out over like 5 minutes where people keep stopping to explain things as if they're not in the middle of a fight. Like they keep talking, and you'll just sit there and watch somebody like Jabbermouth, where they just, it's like a still frame of their face as their mouth just opens and closes a lot, and they talk for like 20 seconds straight, and then it cuts to another angle of somebody else doing that, and I'm like, why are they talking? Why is this villain speech happening right now? Or why are they explaining all these things? And also, like you said before, say it again, they'll say the same thing like 4 times in the same fight, dragging it out even more. And this is an apparent problem in the first episode. Like, I almost full on record scratch, like skipped the whole show just watching episode 1, because it has one of the most egregious examples of this that thankfully doesn't happen most of the season again, but then does happen in the finale again, where it's just like, wow, this is just a fucking monologue instead of a fight, and then it's over in 2 seconds.
So bad in the finale. The finale was, if words were bullets, there would be so much death.
There's a scene in the finale where a fight is clearly starting, like everyone goes into their fight mode, and then like 3 minutes of dialogue happens, and then one blow ends the fight, and then they move on from the scene, and I'm like, what the fuck? Who? I'm so confused. Like I get this weird feeling that I get from like Kojima projects, where I'm like, I feel like one person that was good at one thing ran everything, and like needed somebody to tell them no in certain spots, because this writing disaster.
It's just a mess, and I don't know. The worst part is I don't know if the mess is like, I don't know if the mess is somehow a rewrite. Like, did someone add stuff? Did someone go like, oh no, there's not enough explanation for this, we need to make sure those dummies understand it? Or was this planned all along, and this is just like the worst written story I've ever seen?
So they made Kill la Kill, right?
They made Kill la Kill, Little Witch Academia.
So is this like a digression from them in quality, where you're like, what happened?
So here's the thing, is that Little Witch Academia is a really good example of Trigger sometimes sees something and goes, oh, that's really good. What if we did that? And like Little Witch Academia is, what if we did Harry Potter, but with cute witch girls? And that's literally it. It's just an assumed Muggle girl coming into a magic world full of raised kids, and trying to flip the system because she has Muggle ideas, and the witch world just isn't thinking that way. And like the whole time you're watching, you're like, this is cute, but could you like have a purpose for this? And like, no. And you're like, fuck, okay. So this is kind of, I think this is just what I assumed would be the continual step that they're taking. Kill la Kill was similar in fashion, where I think Kill la Kill had a really good message, but it delivered it in a very clunky way. And fights are the same way in Kill la Kill, where there's someone shows up and it's like, let me tell you a story, and you're like, I'm in the middle of fighting you, could you do that tomorrow? Like,
send me an email.
Yeah, and like it breaks the pace really quickly. But I think there's like, I think they misunderstood what made the fights in Gurren Lagann interesting, which was not the talking. It was the bravado, which is a lot of can be a lot of talking, but the difference is in the character doing the monologuing that's part of his character. And when the character's gone, the monologuing stops happening because he was the monologuer. So that's actually useful, but they were like, no, people like the monologuing. Put it in every fight now. And it's like, no, because that only works with the monologue character. And they're like, oh.
You're like, but Mojo Jojo's dead.
Yeah, basically, like every person in a Trigger anime is just Mojo Jojo for like 5 minutes, and then they punch.
That's their fatal flaw, except it's not their fatal flaw because the other person's also Mojo Jojo, so neither of them will take advantage of the other one talking too much.
Yeah, but yeah, this is they even
lampshaded in the finale, saying like they mentioned the talking too much, and it's like so you know.
Yeah.
Why do you?
That's why I'm curious. Like if there's, that's why I felt like, is this part of the script or is this like did they rewrite and add a bunch of dialogue? Because it seems so jarring when you're watching certain fights and you're like, why did you say that? Like why did you say that at all? This is such a weird thing to say, and then. Yeah,
I assume you listen to it in Japanese voice acting, as per tradition, and I listen to it in English voice acting again. That's just what we always do. So we got the full experience.
Full 360.
The Tanuki girl is very well voice acted. She just does good the whole time, which is good because she's the main character. I was very distracted the entire show by Ogami, the wolf, which is the second most prominent character in the entire show, because he's played by the same actor that plays Haida in Aggretsuko and Jack in Beastars, and in both of those he's doing like the sort of like the sidekick character. Oh man, everyone trusts me, but maybe I'm kind of an incel kind of voice. And
okay,
but
I'll take your word for that.
I'm just fucking going after Haida.
His name is Benjamin Diskin, by the way.
And in this one, it's that guy's voice, but he's trying to put on his, like, my machinations remained undetected for generations voice. Like, he's, like, very serious and terse, and, like, adding bass to his voice, and you can't... It's, like, on some level, I couldn't quite tell if he was doing it himself, or if some of it was also being boosted by editing, because it sounded slightly weird. But specifically,
they pitch shifted a little bit just to try to like get into the low level that they needed.
Specifically, the first episode, I don't know if it was me adjusting to the voice or genuinely that there was a difference. But the first a couple of episodes, it sounded like he was being pitch shifted, and then later on, it didn't sound like that necessarily. But I might have just been getting used to it. But I was definitely like, there was something about it. I guess it's just the recognizability of voices, even when you're like doing a voice, is that like. I specifically couldn't get the image out of my head, I couldn't get the image out of my head of like Haida being Tuxedo Mask. Like, secret identity Haida is here to like mask his voice and be a superhero. Oh, this is my man voice. Like he's Batman or something. Like, it was like, I couldn't unrecognize him as being the same voice actor. And that's not usually that big of a thing for me, especially since usually when I recognize an anime voice actor in English, it's because they're actually doing the same voice. Like how when we watched Beastars, Haru was just the Kairi from Digimon doing the Kairi from Digimon voice, and I was like, it's Kairi from Digimon. Yeah. So I'm not as distracted because it's just like it's the same voice by the same person. But when it's the same, this is one of the first times I've recognized that it's the same person doing a different voice, but it's not. There's a dissonance that I can't get out. It never went away the whole show. And I couldn't tell if it was just because there was times where I was trying to figure out whether the character was, how much of it was the character and how much of it was the voice, because he felt very emotionally flat and terse, which also seemed in character but also seemed out of character at the same time. Like, something about the performance felt slightly off the whole time, even though I think that's probably what Ogami is supposed to sound like, is flat and terse and like dismissive and kind of unexpressive. But
the Japanese voice was very, I wouldn't even say him flat. He was indignant. He had a very like indignant tone where he wasn't interested in what you had to say or anybody had to say.
This whole above it all thing.
Yeah, he's just like, but he wasn't. Which is, I don't know, maybe the subtleties is not there. I feel like he didn't speak that way towards beasts. He only spoke that way towards Michiru.
He does
but
almost.
When he, talked to other,
he does only interact with two characters for most of the show, just the mayor and the protagonist, and no one else. Yeah. Basically, I guess
he interacts with like the police.
Yeah, there's the police chieftain and the villain, but those are
the
rare.
People he lives with. But yeah, like but when he talks to like non-Michiru people, he's not as terse. He's very much like, oh, okay, well, we just need to do something about it. Whereas when he's talking to her, he's like, I don't care. It's like, oh, got him. Like, yeah, it looks like this guy has been doing a lot of.
He's busy.
He's busy. He's also Neon Genesis Evangelion too.
Just in everything now. A Netflix anime voice actor.
By the way, to keep up the record, he is also the side best friend in Neon Genesis.
He's just always the second main character. Yeah. Because Jack and Haida are all protagonist adjacent. They're like the best friends of the protagonist. And then here he's like, he's kind of the best friend of the protagonist. I don't know, second most prominent character. I don't know. There's before going to spoilers, any final thoughts?
I really hope Trigger's next anime isn't just ripping off another Disney or Warner Brothers thing. I hope they just make something original, like
Redline 2.
Oh, God.
It starts exactly where the last one ended. You see them land, dying horribly, and then new characters are introduced.
That'd be very much Trigger on brand, but I'm disappointed because I think BNA could have been at least okay. I don't think it could have been exceptional. It just didn't have that at all. But it could have been interesting enough to carry it to an okay point. But yeah, that's all I can think of. It's just
do not recommend.
I wish.
Do not really recommend.
No, I don't. I do not recommend BNA.
Or at least it's not to either of our tastes. Maybe, I don't know. There's probably an audience of people that just like most anime or something, and they're like, more. This is about on brand. Maybe. I don't know. But I'm frequently condescending to anime audiences.
Well, yeah, but I honestly feel like it's too dumbed down to even be interesting to like even an average person watching this would be like, I get it. I know what's happening.
Yeah, like aside from some visuals, it doesn't really work on any level. Because it's not an action. It really just isn't an action show, but it doesn't have insight really, or an interesting perspective on its subject, and it also doesn't have that much world building. So its setting isn't interesting.
It has like a beat that it wants to build, it cuts and goes away so quickly. Where it's like, okay, that's it, we're done, bye, and you're like, It
also has this idea of setup and payoff where. Aside from when it keeps repeating one idea 50 times, whenever it has like there's a lot of cases where it has one setup, and it's often like specifically cases where like if you need there's certain cases of setup and payoff where you kind of need to follow like the rule of threes at least, where you have like a certain number of examples of that idea to establish that it's a trend before you start acting like it's a trend later in the show when we only have one data point, because there's some shit like that happens where it's just like it kind of needed to. Like this kind of needed to get caught, I think, in like the script writing phase. Like the first step, like the thing that this was holding was being built from, was already in trouble, and then the execution wasn't going to save it, because it's just the plan for the season just wasn't great. Well, it wasn't a great plan.
It's really weird too. Yeah, it's written by the same guy. It's written by the same guy who did Gurren Lagann and Kill la Kill.
Wow.
But he also wrote Promare and O Edo Rocket, which are device. Oh yeah, I forgot Promare. Yeah, Promare was kind of a not great. Well, I shouldn't say that because people will get mad at me. It was a I guess not to my taste type anime. I feel like his writing is very 50-50 coin flip here.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So let's go into spoilers then. Spoiler warning forever.
Let's...
This end the podcast. This is the episode has ended now. If you're not here for spoilers,
spoilers only.
We might just sit here and go like episode. Zoom in a little bit. Episode by episode for
Cuffs
a bit.
are off. It's time.
Cuffs are off. Fuck.
Episode 1.
The seams start to show very quickly. We're introduced to like this like hooded figure that's trying to escape to a place called Anima City, because apparently she's an animal person and that's where they're safe. Apparently.
Yeah.
So she's going there. She gets attacked by a gang of roaming humans that are here to stop all the animals from getting to the animal place.
No. They are literally border patrol agents who specifically say that they know that the only way to get into the city is by this one particular freeway on this one particular bus.
Like,
so
this is the road where people always try to escape. So they come in like a bike gang to hit people with bats on the side of the road, basically. And like immediately, like right off the bat, they fucking
just
like
so cartoonish.
I think they're on motorcycles and they shoot like a bow at her, like an arrow hits her fucking phone.
They shoot a crossbow.
It's so rapid fire. We're like, oh, this is escalating very quickly. It's just a lot. And there's one little crack here, which is that there's just this weird sequence where she's like, I guess they're trying to show off her animal prowess in animal mode. So she's like, she jumps off the bus and lands on like the guardrail, and she's running on the guardrail for like a weirdly long time while somebody is alongside her on a bike and like about to attack her and stuff. And I'm like, get off the road. They all have vehicles. Just get off the road. Why is she running in a straight line? But it's just a moment. It's kind of that time dilation that happens in anime where you just pause on something for too long. And you're like, and it always kind of irks me. But this one stood out. But no, what's going to be an issue is that you look at this later and you realize that like there's a few things. Like one, immediately you assume like, oh, she must have like become infected by animalness or became an animal. Like maybe it's like X-Men where it's like a puberty angle where it's like, oh, when you're like a teenager, your like mutant powers manifest and you're like, oh fuck, I'm different and I have to go run away now or everyone's gonna persecute me.
That's what I thought. That was my first assumption, was that it must be because it's a teenage girl, it must be a puberty thing. Because
it's like, why is she running to the city alone, and why would people have to run to the city and so on? But this is where the gap comes in, is that you later find out that she's unique, and that's not normal. Everyone
and her friend are unique.
So everyone's born an animal person or not born an animal person.
Yes.
So then I'm like, wait, but the city's been around for at least a decade, so like people have the chance at this point to like choose where to be, or like either in the animal city or not in the animal city and so on. Like, how much luck does this patrol get at catching anyone each day? Like, how many people are fleeing to Animal City if like they don't find out midway through their teenage years that they're an animal now and they have to go run away? Like,
I think they also mean they're trying to hunt people who come to the mainland for business purposes
or something, which is
like, I would imagine
you would think is crimes.
Which you would imagine is a literal crime, because
just hunting like Japanese citizens.
Yeah, like no matter what, even if they're beasts, they're still technically under the rule of Japan. Like, they are legally Japanese citizens.
Yeah.
So like, you're still committing a murder of a citizen. It doesn't be okay because they can also turn into a crab. Like, that doesn't suddenly make the murder okay.
But as you learn about this city, you find out that it's been around for like a decade at this point, right?
I do want to also point out that they are, as far as I'm aware, they did not specify otherwise, they all look Japanese. There's no specification that anybody looks Westerner or
it takes place in Japan. Like, there's interactions with the Prime Minister of Japan and so on.
But technically, Ogami isn't from Japan.
Yeah, that does raise a Japanese. Oh yeah, because Ogami's from Europe. Yeah, because that's a whole other thing to unpack.
Yeah, the moment they said that, I was like, wait, you're not Japanese? Why do you look like that?
But the thing
yeah.
I think I take issue with is just that it goes to the Bright school of world building. Have you seen Bright?
Yeah.
Bright was like a universe where like 1,000 years ago or something, the orcs and whatnot came to Earth and all that shit happened. But also like nothing in history has changed. Like the Alamo still happened and the World Wars still happened and everything still happened with like just all of history for the last 1,000 years played out the same way. But there was just randomly elves and orcs and centaurs there, which somehow had no impact on history.
Well, they try to excuse it with like, oh, remember those hieroglyphs? Those were real. And you're like, pardon me, like those were gods. Yeah, Are you telling me that the beastmen were considered gods and that they just fucking walked around asking for fucking fruit? Like, are you joking?
Yeah, that's the thing that they're vague about it throughout this show here and there, and it's messy. But like, there are some parts where it's like, it almost sounds like beastmen just became apparent that they exist to society. Like society, almost like they were like an underground society no one knew about until like a decade ago or something, and then they like showed up and they fought for rights. But like, actually, they've been around forever, and like that's why the Egyptian hieroglyphs have animal people and whatnot. But they've been like hiding or whatever. But nope, they've just been in society for all this time apparently. So like, no, they
can turn into humans, so you would never know.
But you find out, yeah, that like beastmen weren't a secret. They've apparently been around all this time. But all of America, like all of the world's like history doesn't seem to have been changed in any noticeable way, or they don't say anything changed.
They kind of imply that no one would have known that they were animal people until like the advent of blood. You know, like until science got to the point where we could study blood, and they found
it's like science fucked
DNA.
Everything up.
Yeah, because they act like every animal has a specific specific acid. They call it like it's a dihydro something.
Well, it's like they reveal the equivalent of like The Last of Us, like, are you infected or not? Like, put this on their neck meter.
Yeah,
but for beastmen, so it's like science made racism worse.
Yeah, and they imply that like when kids, remember, because they like one of the plot points was that she was trying to say, I'm human, but I'm also a beast, and they're like, no, you're not, you just don't know. And she's like, no, my citizenship card says I'm a human. It literally says I'm not one of you. Like, and like, which is a weird thing.
Yeah, because you can't be. Everyone. Yeah, that's like, one of the reasons, you know, like beastmen have been out, is that their fucking IDs say that they're human, which is not a normal thing for an ID to say, unless there's another option besides humans. It's like they're clearly in a society where non-humans just are around and whatnot.
And
but all of history played out the same way, seemingly. There's no implication of otherwise. It's just kind of
They do make some allusions to the idea that beastmen existed during wars, which was kind of a weird throwaway to make that you didn't follow through with. Like the Pelican guy shows up and is like, yeah, we had some friends in the war that used to scout out, and I was like, pardon me? Like, there just were beastmen flying around.
Oh god, yeah, you just reminded me of like the specific, because I was trying to remember why I have this idea in my head that history played out the same way, because I was like, I think I remember having this thought, but I couldn't remember why I thought that. And then I remember you said wars, and I'm like, fucking, they had Nazi camps, and alongside all of the Jewish people and so on, there were apparently beastmen being experimented on. And it's like, really, even that played out exactly the same, but it's like the beastmen were also in there, and it's like, this is some, like, it's like just like a lot of this. There's a few shows I've seen recently, including like Attack on Titan and stuff. I'm like, this is like a real heavy direction to go in. You got to be real sure this is what you want to do with your show. But they just like, they just kind of flash to World War II concentration camps very abruptly for one part of one episode, which apparently also, the mayor was from, and that's where she met Ogami.
Yeah, the mayor is also German descent, but doesn't look German. She actually looks Japanese. So again, that's another time where it's like, where are you getting these beastmen? Why are they all Japanese?
I think the show's just not interested in trying to represent human races in any way, so they just kind of look like anime characters, and that's about it.
I was confused because I was trying to actually look for other races.
I mean, you spend most of the show wondering what's going on with their face wrinkles.
Well, that too, yeah.
The mayor has Klingon like forehead wrinkles.
Well, she's a Siamese cat,
which you then see her when she's young, and she still has them when she's young too. And it's like, in her human form, and I'm like, huh.
Yeah, I don't know why her human form
no one else looks
it,
that much like their beast form in human form. Like there's like nods, but nobody does that. Like she straight up has face wrinkles that stick around no matter what, and that's like it's like a weird exception sort of thing. I was like, what are the rules here?
Think you wouldn't be able to tell otherwise.
Yeah,
like she would just look like a normal person.
When she turns into a Siamese cat, her head just kind of stretches a bit. And you're like, oh, she's in beast form, which happens like twice. Yeah. And at first you don't even notice because she looks really similar. Like going from the beginning of the show, they do some stuff that's right. That I got a kick out of the. Okay, so the main character ends up getting smuggled into the city in a different way, and she walks into this dark square. And she has the equivalent of like the end of episode 1 of Pokemon Ho-Oh sighting, where she sees a legendary beastman just randomly because she sees this glowing wolf on a roof, and it's like, what's that? And then there's this creepy scene where everyone just comes at her in the darkness in these masks, and then they all morph into beastmen forms, and it's all a big parade, and it's a festival, and it's like, surprise. And I was a little disappointed actually because like you find out that like everyone's just in beast form for that event, but then they're actually supposed to be in human form otherwise all the time, even though this is the Beast City, which seemed like a weird choice for the show. Yeah, that people spend all their time in human form in the Beast City because apparently like being in beast form is seen as like a threat, like your claws are out, which is like an unfortunate view to have of your own like natural state.
Not to be mean, but it is a very it sounds very Japanese.
The restraint
to have an appearance, like you must upkeep a specific appearance in public. But it doesn't make any sense in the allegory of like, that's why we don't live with the humans, because they don't like us even if we're human.
Once they live amongst themselves, they still like shelter and hide as being human all the time. And I'm like,
but remember that's not even but it doesn't even follow its own rules that way, because Michiru is just human in beast form all the time, and only once is it seen as an act of aggression, and never again. Everyone just kind of accepts that she looks like this, and they're like, oh, that weird girl always in beast form.
That's an important detail, is that throughout the show, whenever they attempt world building, they'll establish something like that, but then never mention it again. So like
just throw it away immediately.
Because in episode 2, she goes to Rabbit Town, and because she's in beast form, because she can't control it, everyone takes it as like a threat, because it's like she has her weapon drawn or whatever. But that's never mentioned again in the entire show. That's just a one-off thing out of nowhere. There's a lot of that. But the show, what I liked is that the show has one of the better character introductions I've seen, which is they introduce Ogami, and the first frame you see of him, where you know it's him, is just him looking up at the parade and crying. And I'm like, all right, well that like raises several questions, and it's like a neat image of like what's like, you're like, okay, there's this small girl is looking up at this like big wolf dude that's looking up and just sobbing, and you're like, all right, what's this character's deal? And then he's like,
you're like, what's happening?
And his one line, he kind of just speaks to like himself, is like, it's like basically like the equivalent of like, beastmen have been working 1,000 years for this moment or something like that. And it's like, okay, well that's several questions, okay. And it's like, that's actually like, it's not like subtle, but it's like okay at like establishing some ideas without like coming out and just like monologuing them directly to the camera. You're like, okay, is he just like in touch with his history, or is he 1,000 years old?
You're kind of like, is he very nationalistic? Is that why he's so happy that the beasts are having a party, like, or is he just like, have you been here for 1,000 years watching this shit or something?
Like if he just said that smiling or something, you'd be like, oh, okay, he's just like talking about like he's just kind of thinking about like the history and reminiscing or whatever, and I'm like, wow, look how far we've come or whatever. But he's like sobbing, so you're like, wait, was he there for the 1,000 years? Like, that's the first thought I had without any context about the possibility.
Crying is such a striking visual. Yeah. Or like, yeah, if he had just...
Especially when you're introducing like a show
a,
badass.
Yeah, like even if he had just made a snide comment of like, I can't believe it took this long to get here. You could infer like, what, 10 years, 20 years, 1,000 years? Like you could kind of assume, but you would still be in the wrong. But him crying is like, okay, it's not that, like everyone else isn't crying. This seems kind of like you're taking it a little too seriously, bud.
At that point in the show, he's not involved with the main character. So he doesn't have anyone.
This is your first encounter.
Yeah, and he has no one to open up to. So if you just had that one, like that one line single-handedly sets up his entire character better than anything else that happens in the entire rest of the episode. But then they squander it for the rest of the episode. Because he goes from, you think he's going to be this quiet character that just establishes these things and these little lines that are kind of cleverly set up and so on. But then he won't shut up. Like suddenly he's the most talkative character in the entire show, despite that seeming to not be his character. And specifically what happens is, once again, there's a relatively well set up little scene where the main character chases after a pickpocket because she needs her ID and everything. Well, she doesn't know that yet, but she's chasing her after the pickpocket. That takes her wallet, and she ends up like under these like rafters, and she looks over and she sees Wolf Job. That's all I can call it. do you remember
unfortunate.
that? Do you remember that one? That you remember the animated parody of Wolf Job that had like the guy that was like he was like the artist. Like he was like he was the animator of the parody, and he's dressed that way. Like it looked exactly like that Wolf Job.
Exactly.
But you see him, and when he sees her, he pulls his cap down and runs away. You're like, well, that's fucking suspicious. And then once again, like that's good visual storytelling without lots of exposition and shit. We're like, okay, I instantly get what's going on here. That place is probably gonna explode, and then it explodes. Like so far, for a few minutes here, the storytelling is like not horrible. Like it's being told, a lot of it's being told visually and through like one line at a time, and it's completely succeeding at establishing whatever it's trying to establish. And that kind of stops permanently after that scene, because then Ogami activates.
I mean, I do like the visual of like as it's falling, everybody just kind of goes out of the way, but the turtle is like slowly walking, and she's like, "Oh no, like pushing." That's fun. But yeah, the moment all of the kerfuffle stops, the moment it comes time to do crime solving, then it goes down very quickly. Yeah, because then, as I'm sure you're about to talk about, the superpower knows.
Ogami activates his superpower where he is Lucius Fox from Dark Knight Rises, or The Dark Knight, and so on, where he can just see the entire city instantly. Which is, by the way, a plot point that's mostly going to go away after a couple of episodes, but it gets an even dumber use like an episode later. But in this episode, he activates his super sense where he magically can detect where anything is. That's the plot convenience. And so he's able to track down the bomber to this van with his two allies, where they are the ones who like did the whole bombing and everything. And then you're like, okay, that was weird, but I'll accept that. Then he's like up on top of a building looking down at those the terrorists in their van. And he uses his sense, and he sees 4 humans standing behind them, but like the specter of them, like they're not physically there, but the point is that they smell of humans. Once again, I'm like, this is visual storytelling. You're establishing that these guys are mercenaries working for an outside force that's against this city's interests.
Yeah.
It'd be a shame if they spent the next 4 minutes explaining that in great detail during the fight, when I already know it from that visual. That visual instantly fucking nailed it. You didn't have to explain anything, but then they like lost their mind, like they were afraid we wouldn't get it. Which is extra weird because they're not even really setting up a future plot point, because this whole attack kind of never comes up again, and the people who did the attack don't seem to be especially important unless they're setting up something for like season 2 or something, if there ever will be one. Because like the 4 people, you like, if the show was all about tracking down the people behind that attack, that'd be one thing. It's not. So like that's not setting anything up. but like every single part, like I straight up was like, I was watching the scene that's like, for once I have that horrible conceited feeling of like, I could fix this. Like I was tempted to like do the full fucking YouTube video essayist thing where you're like, I'm now going to fix the script of this thing, where you like take it into your editing bay, and what I'd mostly do is just every time they start talking, cut to when they stop talking. Because for the entire time, like Ogami gives this big speech about how you guys are traitors to the beastmen, and I will fight to the death to save the beastmen, and the beastmen have fought so long to get to where we are, and the beastmen and the honor of the beastmen, how dare you betray the beastmen? And he just keeps going and going, and these people are all like, nah, we're mercenaries, we'll work for anyone that'll pay us, beastman or human, we don't care what the results are, I have no regrets. And it's like, this is all very unnecessary. Just fucking fight. Like every single line adds nothing to the story, and most of it it just strains the believability of the fight scene itself, because they're somehow monologuing to each other for some reason, and like it's almost like because it's almost like they wanted to like weaken the blow of the fact that Ogami is about to like get very violent, and they want to deaden that blow by being like, I have no regrets, just to seal the deal on how evil these people are, so you don't feel bad for them when he rips the antlers off of one of them. Like, which was great. That's such a great scene where he like steps on his head. He's like, wait, no, and he's like, boop. Unfortunately, that's like a rule of twos, and then they just drop it. Oh yeah. Because one more time, he turns him around and then hits the guy that's going behind him. Oh no, I mean the fact that it seems to be a character trait that he's going to be doing, like he's going to find beastmen. They keep setting up ideas that don't come up. It's like he's going to find beastmen that are like traitors to the beastmen and that don't deserve their status as beastmen, and then he's going to declaw them in one way or another. But it only happens one more time in the early, like 2 episodes later, he takes off a rhino's horn, and then it never happens again. They completely throw out that character trait and that trend, and it just never shows up again. He technically doesn't fight anyone else. The finale? Yeah, until he fights the same rhino guy again. I keep trying to get a feel of like, okay, where's the show going? Like, what's it going to go? And like, so when you see certain setups like that, you're like, okay, that's a character trait he does. Like, he's done it a second time, so that's like a trend, right? Then you think back to it later and you're like, that just kind of, they established that like twice in 3 episodes, and then the rest of the show just kind of goes out the window for the rest of it. Doesn't do it again. And there's a lot of stuff that just kind of comes and goes. Like they go to Rabbit Town in episode 2, and there's this whole crime syndicate of women that talk about how hard it is to live as a woman in beastman civilization and in the society, and that never comes up again. And none of those characters ever go up again. And like this apparent problem that women have in Beastman society is never mentioned again, especially not by any of the other several female characters that aren't the main character that live there, including the mayor, who is also a woman who apparently doesn't want to help her own gender have a better equality status in this fucking city she built. You have the mayor, you have the main character's caretaker is that koala lady. And you have the mink, and none of them comment on this ever, a single time. No. So it's just this mink, throwaway idea. You can argue the mink is like not a part of society because she is just like she's a criminal. She's a scoundrel smuggler character. But yeah, the fact that like one of the actual people that helps you immigrate into Annie City is a woman who at no point mentions this to Michiru, that like, oh, life is a lot harder for women here, so just be ready when just be aware you're a single woman, you might want to find yourself a good beast man and settle down. As far as I can tell, it's just an episode specific development and isn't true to the show, or they just forgot to do more with it. With like they were trafficking children out of the city. Which is like, what? What the fuck? Are you joking? That episode mentions child trafficking and it never comes up again. That's episode 2. You're like, episode 2. All right, shit. So you're immediately hit with like the worst that this show could possibly get in 2 episodes. And then it goes like, we're going to play baseball. And you're like, what the fuck? Like, what the fuck are we doing? Episode 3 is the bombing episode, which is the second And almost what's up?
That's the you're right. Episode 3
Rhino
is the
Melancholy. I got it open.
Me too.
Episode 3 is the Rhino episode, and that's the bombings, and that's the second and the most significant use of Ogami's magic power, where he's magic.
No. The fucking dog literally says, maybe they fix it in the English dub, but in the Japanese version, he literally says, "Don't worry about him, he's immortal." I was like, what? That's literally a fucking spoiler, bro. Like, could you tell me this later?
You mean that? That's true. He has 2 cases of magic in this episode just leaking out. But the one I was thinking of is that he's got his sense of smell that is just map hacks. He's cheating. Like, he literally is like, they find out that there's gonna be like bombings across the city apparently, so he just stands on a rooftop and sniffs and instantly knows where every single bomb is in the entire city and just takes them all out. And I'm like, I don't know what world that sense and smell could ever work that way.
Well, but then so it does try to argue that,
specifically
it's because of his powers.
It's so nonsense.
The police chief is a fucking bloodhound.
Yeah,
and he can't smell the fucking bombs. I was like, dude, you're one job.
It's a lot to take in. But it keeps iterating and being more ridiculous because you find out
so much hero-itis.
When the one bomb goes out, when the one bomb does go off, you find out like, oh, they must have used an agent on that to remove its smell. And so then he's able to figure out that because he also smells the bomb site, where he's able to smell the particular person that probably did it, but he also goes to that person and can tell from a distance that specifically his hands don't smell.
Yes.
Because his hands don't smell like him because they smell because
sense.
They were also using the thing. It's like a Sherlock moment, but it's like next level superpowers. He doesn't even sniff his hands. Like he's standing across the room and is like, dude, I'm using my nose sense right now, and your hands are invisible. So that's basically what he says. Like his hands are invisible essentially.
I don't mind the idea that he can like differentiate objects based on smell. That does make sense in a, like, you can argue that animals have a unique, like especially wolves have really good sense of smell. They can differentiate. He literally sits on the ground, smells, and sees time pass, which is not acceptable. I was like, how the fuck can you smell the past? What does that smell like? Is there a tingy flavor to the past smell where you're like, oh, I can tell this happened yesterday because this is like a slightly sour smell of a human, and a human smell stays fresh for 8 hours. And like, what the fuck?
Yeah, they show his smell sense as seeing like crowds of people walking backwards, implying that he can see the entire history of this room, essentially, at least recently. And it's like next level, like, all right, you can just make his powers do anything. I get it. All right. Which, funnily enough, these powers they get toned down a lot. Like, I don't think his smell comes up that much throughout the show, especially not in these extreme examples like this. But this episode does also.
But I really hate the fact that he has this super fancy smell. But his fucking arch nemesis doesn't smell like anything. Like, he doesn't remember the smell of his arch nemesis. Like, in the backstory where he's like looking for the descendant, he can't actually smell the descendant. And I was like, how the fuck did you develop this sense of smell? When did you develop it? Because when he went to go find the person to kill him, he was already the wolf god thing. So you should have that sense of smell. So you should know what your fucking arch nemesis smells like. Nope, couldn't find him. I guess he just got away. I'm like, how?
I think there's a throwaway line where I think they imply he lost his memory when he became the White Wolf. I think there was like a throwaway line about that.
He still specifically remembers who it was that killed him.
Yeah, it's foggy about what how that works to that part. But there's an issue here where like you spend about half the season with people asking over and over again, like, what's the White Wolf? Who's the White Wolf? The White Wolf? What's the White? Wow, what's that? Who could that be? Is he real?
We pray to the White Wolf, and not like
literally in the first episode. It's like literally in the first episode, you establish this character who's crying at the festival about how it's been 1,000 years, and then 2 episodes later, he falls from a skyscraper and survives. Also, and still, everyone's still like, who's the white wolf? Like, oh man, we'll never know.
Probably has no, I'm sure there's hundreds of them. And he's also a white wolf.
And just in case it wasn't clear, he is also literally. It's silver wolf. Like, he is a silver wolf.
Silver wolf.
And he looks like a silver wolf. And there's a mythical silver wolf character. And the main characters saw him
in this entire show.
Yeah.
Like, we don't even see others, so we could be like,
which is surprising.
I get it. This is like a breed of animals, right? No, just him. He's the only silver wolf. Oh, okay. Probably not the same silver wolf that's a deity, though. No relation.
And just
also
to
hung out with the mayor,
like,
who was in a concentration camp that was saved by the silver wolf. No relation. Probably no correlation there at all. Like, what is this?
And just like right before she sees him crying and everything, she also just saw him in silver wolf form on the roof. Like, she didn't see him come down and transform or anything, but like, boy, like 3 things happened that day. You saw the silver wolf, you saw a silver wolf crying, just a silver wolf, and then you saw a bomb explode. And that was your day, more or less, during that festival. It's like, there's not that many dots to connect. And then, especially when the same character instantly smells the entire universe through time and then falls out of a building and survives. Like, he seems to fall like 50 feet. 50 floors. And then he just gets up immediately and walks away. And he's like, oof, that's smarts. And that's his recovery, apparently, is like, for a moment, he's like, ouchies. It's like, the show acting like it's a mystery at all is like rough to sit through. They also
did another thing where at one point they go out, like Michiru and Ogami go on a little adventure, and the koala girl gives them this meat that she prays to for the wolf, and she says, if you meet the silver wolf, you give him this meat, and Ogami just fucking straight eats it. Yeah, and you're like, that's weird.
Smash cuts to him on the street eating the meat. That's a tribute to the silver wolf.
Yeah. And Michiru is even like, that's bad manners, it's supposed to be for the silver wolf. And he just goes like, it doesn't matter. Yeah. And just keeps going. And at no point she goes like, that's weird behavior. I would only imagine you do that if you were, the silver wolf, the only character in this entire universe who doesn't have faith in the fucking silver wolf. Like,
he has a good line there where he's like, no true God would refuse to save you just because you don't feed him.
I guess
this is like his explanation or whatever. Let's see, what do we
got here? He is weirdly the only atheist. He seems to have
the one character
interest.
who doesn't have any interest in worshiping the silver wolf is a silver wolf.
Wow, weird
who can fall from skyscrapers and survive, and no one knows how old he is.
Infuriating.
There's like so many questions.
Infuriating.
Next episode was Dolphin episode.
Oh, by the way, Rhino Melancholy also has a really, really, really obvious Michiru might have accidentally been turned into a beast girl. We're not going to say that outright, but there is this one fucking lizard or a chameleon who literally just goes,
her DNA?
If only you weren't here. And you go, that's a weird thing to say to a random girl who has a beast disease. Like, I don't know why you would say that to me, holding me over a building you want to kill me for. Is there possibly a reason you want to murder me? Maybe an accident that you made in this laboratory for beast people? Huh. Just a very not subtle.
More foreshadowing. And by foreshadowing, basically they mean just spoiling. Their way of setting something up is just to spoil it immediately and then act like you're still paying it off later. But the next episode is Dolphin Daydream, and this one opens with a fucking bang, which is the whole motivation Michiru has, apparently, is that she's trapped in beast form. She had to run here to escape persecution and attacks and so on, and blend in with the Beastman society. But in the episode 4 in a 12-episode season, in episode 4, she already transforms back to a human.
Yes.
Like, just casually, she's like, "Oh shit! Oh man, I did it! I'm human now." Whoa.
A lot of the episodes are her never connecting the dots that her unique ability of being a tanuki, which for some reason she keeps saying she's not, which is stupid because that would be really helpful for your fucking mindset because tanukis can literally shapeshift, you fucking moron.
But
and
also
so
her being a tanuki doesn't matter because another character is just like her and isn't a tanuki and also can shapeshift.
Is a kitsune, which can also shapeshift in Japanese
folklore. Is it?
Oh. Yes. So both her friend and her are both shape-shifting fucking animals. One of them embraces that idea and does the shape-shifting. The other one goes, nah, I'm not that, but then also wants to be human again, but just doesn't fucking connect the dots that her goddamn animal could shape-shift.
I can accept her taking a bit, because, like, at that point, she had all this, the main thing she'd figured out at that point was, like, she had a few instances where she, like, stretches or something.
So like she expands her tail to save herself. So remember, in the first episode, she makes her tail giant, so she cushions a fall. Second episode, she makes her arms spaghetti noodles. The third episode,
I think she has both of those in episode 2 because she does them both. She discovers her shapeshifting like during the cage scene, which spaghetti is during that, then lands with the tail.
In episode 1, when she gets knocked off the bus. Her tail expands and then she jumps back onto the bus, and I thought that was really
that must have come at us so quickly and so early that I didn't even register what it was establishing.
Because the moment I saw
I don't know anything about the show yet at that point.
So that's what ruined. Well, I feel like that ruined. I don't know. Maybe it ruined it because the moment I saw that shapeshift and then the hood goes away and you see her, I was like, oh, she's a tanuki.
Yeah.
Because that's the only animal that can do shapeshifting. And why would her tail expand unless she is shapeshifting? Yeah. But no one else connects these dots until like later. I was like, wait, don't you all live in Japan? Isn't this like part of your fucking folklore? Like, come on, guys.
Maybe she's the only tanuki, but everyone knows what a tanuki is.
Yes.
Because everyone keeps telling her she's a tanuki.
And she keeps saying, no, I'm not. And I'm like, that would be great for you to be a tanuki because then you could be the thing you want to be, a human. You could even be a fucking cow. You could be whatever the fuck you want to be. But like, she gets spindly arms. Again, goes, I don't know how I got spindly arms. It must be this weird raccoon ability I am. Like, okay.
We get to this dolphin episode, and
yes,
it's just it just breaks me a little bit because like
also
she has the issue here is like we didn't
behavior, by the way. To look on Facebook Live, see someone recording and go, that's them, and then run up
track
to them
down via the stream. Yeah, that's a huge boundary cross.
Very unhealthy behavior.
You don't hunt people down on their live streams and like ambush them. That's a lot. Yeah, that's also, the thing she does.
Way, I want to point out that the dolphin doesn't get mad at her for doing this, even though the dolphin literally was doing a live stream as a human because she's in disguise. She's like making a live stream for humans as a human and pretending to be one. And this fucking tanuki just runs up and goes, aren't you a beastman? Okay, cool.
They're like, if we talk about like how like later on the main story is going to get really rushed and really expositional and it's going to be really horrible. And this is kind of another example of like wasted world building, because with the dolphin they established for this episode that, by the way, beastmen and Anima City, it's not an easy name to say. Anima City doesn't have internet access. They only have their own private internet, so they can't go to the rest of the internet. But here's a special super phone that can have access to the outside internet. And then the moment she uses it, she finds a currently active live stream in the same park she's in, and that enables the story of that episode, and the internet's never brought up again.
Well, no, it is brought up again, because she has to pay the bill for the internet in a different episode, and she ends up charging it to Ogami.
But it's also like a throwaway still, but it's like they'll establish entire world mechanics just to make that story happen for that one episode, and then it doesn't fold into the story later in the season basically ever. It's always always true.
It's really weird that we don't get to see more division because of the curtailed news. Like the idea that both sides don't actually get to know what's going on in both worlds, which for Anima City makes a lot less sense, because they are literally still Japanese citizens who don't have any awareness to like the current prime minister, or if there's any kind of law that makes animals illegal or legal to hunt. They have no idea of like the politics in this country they are getting shelter in.
But also the internet's not like Japan exclusive. It's universal. Like the whole world gets the internet. So the idea that just Anima City is like banned is like a strange detail for the world.
So I think this is kind of like going on the idea, like Anima City doesn't have internet. They have a local network. And that's what they have access to. It's kind of like North
essentially
Korea,
like they banned
North Korea
it's like they
doesn't
essentially
have the
banned an entire
internet.
ethnic group from the internet.
Yeah. Well, no. Remember, they're not banned. Anima City banned themselves from the internet.
Did they remove themselves from the internet?
Yes.
It was self-induced? Weird.
Yes. It's not like Anima City was like, you can't build your 5G towers in here, they cause corona. Like,
it's one of those things where like I would understand this plot point better if it mattered. Because like if they mattered and came up again, then I'd be able to learn how the world works. But they quickly throw something at you in one line, and then it never will come up again. And
that's
so
what's
it's just not world building.
that
It's just kind of like building up a fact sheet.
Yeah,
it's like when you read like the fact sheet of like here's all the details about the Knights of Ren in like a weird Star Wars like art book somewhere, and it's like, okay, well none of that came up in the movie, so who fucking cares? It's like those kinds of throwaway lines are happening throughout the show where it's like, this isn't building anything, so it's kind of not really world building.
There's a prequel light novel you could read. Please culture yourself.
Oh god. Oh, to the show?
Yeah.
Does that fill it all in?
But it's a prequel, so no.
My issue with the placement of this Dolphin episode is that she has not formed bonds in Anima City yet. We have not seen her grow close to any characters that would make her want to stay here. And then she establishes, oh, I can transform into a human now. I could go home. And then she just doesn't go home for the rest of the show, despite not like, it's one thing if you're like nearing the end of the storyline and you're like, oh, but the friends I've made here, like I can't just go and leave now. I've got to stay. I got to stay here with my friends, and I'm like, it's like character growth and an arc. But it's like, no, the show just started, and you already got rid of your one reason why you have to stay here, and you're just gonna not really address that for the rest of the show. The fact that she doesn't actually have to stay here anymore, seemingly.
By the way, still underage, meaning she still has no job. She's still living at like a commune place.
Oh no, she just gets adopted by some people, basically.
It's very fortunate of her that there are not more immigration happening to Anima City that would cause this to be an uncomfortable living situation.
And she keeps talking about how she misses her family and her home and everything, but at the end of the show, she's just like, fuck it. I'm gonna stay here because the show has to keep happening. If I leave, then the show's canceled.
There's like a really great point that this episode has, which is it shows that humans aren't given any understanding of beastkin. They have no idea how they work or operate at all. And it's really good because it does show like there is this division in even information or like
we should explain that what happens here is that the Dolphin character that's introduced this episode never comes up again, except she's seen in a crowd later and that's it. She's like a social media star, but she pretends to be a human all the time. And they go to a party across the bay that's in human land. And she's there to be like, cashing in her social media cred as like an online celebrity human, but immediately outs herself as a dolphin. And everyone's just like, wow, look, oh, she's a dolphin. And they're like all kind of celebratory of it. But then like behind her back,
I want to point out
Michiru
that
keeps seeing people.
The only reason she exposed herself is because they set this up in the beginning of the episode, that she has a bad habit of when she gets excited, because she's a fucking, she's a seal, right? She's not a dolphin.
She's a dolphin.
She's a seal. She's a dolphin?
Yeah, they call her a dolphin. The episode's called Dolphin Daydream.
She looks like a seal.
Yeah, no, her design's garbage. Her design is the most not like her animal of the entire show. Like everyone else is really clearly identifiable, and she's like a Pokemon. She's completely baffling looking.
And because she's a female dolphin. In any case,
she would 100% is a bizarre Pokemon Chimera nightmare creature instead of any kind of dolphin character.
When she gets excited, she runs up and then does a jump, like a jump in the air, and then converts into her beastkin form. Because she does that when Michiru shows up, and she's like, wait, you were in the human world? Wow. And she like jumps and transforms into a dolphin. And she's like, oh my God, you're a dolphin. So that's what happens in this situation, is that a friend that she knows from the internet shows up and she's like, you're my friend, and then turns into a dolphin because she just fucking can't be can't control herself somehow. Like apparently just has no self-control, no like sense of fear living in this city or going to a city where literally humans want to kill her.
She's really sheltered. Well, she even calls sheltered. It out because they're like there's a few little moments here that are decent, because like one, like while they're all celebrating her to her face, Michiru is like off towards like the bathroom or something, and someone's like there's people like walking by and talking like, man, they're like, I mean, like they're not like us, like they're basically animals, aren't they? Like they're like, you hearing them talk behind her back while they're celebrating her to her face. Well, there's these little details like oh, let's all just have a moment to accept, to acknowledge just how hard things have been for her, because they're all trying to feel good about this, essentially, about like they're all like giving a good show to this one person, but like she's like, actually, because she's fine. She's like at the top of society in Anima City. Like she's like the daughter of a crime lord that's completely sheltered and pampered. Now that we know that
children trafficking and like the slums exist, she's living a pretty good life. She has an illegal phone that can access the internet.
Things escalate dramatically when they like Michiru walks off for 1 second and comes back, and then they've like accidentally almost murdered her. Like she was tired, so he picked her up and somehow put her in the saltwater tank she can't get back out of, and now she's like suffocating to death or something in the saltwater tank. And it's like, how the fuck did she get in there, and why can't she get back out? Can't she swim? I don't. It's like Michiru has to rescue her, and this episode's more or less over, and she never comes up again. But it was just like a lot to take in. But like this was the episode where the whole time you're just thinking like, so Michiru is just gonna go home now, right? And she keeps just staying,
right?
And then the episode ends with her staying in Anima City, and you don't know why.
She doesn't even like. I just want to point out, not at any point does she go to her parents and say like, no, hey guys, just a heads up, I'm doing okay. Like I managed to figure out how to turn into a human, but I can't stay because obviously my blood is animal blood. So I gotta go. But I love you guys. Thanks for taking care of me. Not just fucking noped out and will never talk to her family again, apparently.
It's got huge D&D vibes. That specific aspect of D&D where you have a party and you all want to be special characters that have their own unique backstories and motivations and character designs and alignments and all that. But then you deal with the reality of just like, well, I mean, we got to just kind of stick together and do the story, right? If we don't want to just completely fuck this campaign for the DM and everyone involved. So like you kind of like curb certain parts of your ambitions for like how much you want to like split off, or how much you'd be in direct contradiction of all the other characters, because like at some point you all just kind of have to agree to go on the quest, otherwise this whole thing doesn't happen. And there's like an aspect of like Michiru is like that one like fifth character in the party that has really poor motivation for still being in the party, but they just want to keep playing D&D. But she's the protagonist, which is a weird spot to be in as the protagonist of a show. She has like no motivation for existing in the show at this point, which is when the show completely goes into fuck off mode. And it's my favorite episode of the show. Greedy Bears is my favorite episode of the entire show. I had so much fun with the stupid baseball arc where she just meets this pack of these stupid bears, and she finds out that baseball is like a murder. It's like a blood sport. Like, it's baseball rules, but also you can just attack each other, apparently, and it's not really clarified what the fuck that really even means for the most part.
Yeah, they kind of gloss over it very quickly because they're just going to stop doing that anyways. So they just mention it's a violent sport, but then go like, we're not going to murder, though. So, okay.
They just comedically introduce, like, half a dozen different sports teams that are all themed around a different, like, species, basically. Like, there's the bear team and the flamingo team.
The flamingos and
I just learned to love the bear team because the characterization was a lot of fun a lot of the time, and like specifically the one character that I always get annoyed by is like the tiny, like, cutesy mascotty character, but the way that they pulled him off in this show, he's one of my favorite characters in the entire show. Is it a her?
Yeah, it's a girl.
The girl. Oh, I know the bear was a girl. They're definitely very young, which makes it hard to tell because they're a bear.
Also,
and they're like 5.
She doesn't have a human form. At least not that I can tell,
No,
because she's like one.
You see her human form.
She basically just doesn't have ears. Is her human form? She has like the same hair, the same face.
Yeah, she has like
everything about her.
She has
same.
like a orange bowl cut around her head, basically.
Yeah, but then when she goes to bear form, she has brown eyes and ears pop out. And I was like, sure, I guess you're different. Oh, all right. But like the other bears are actual bears. Like
that character made me laugh more than anything in the entire show. That was intentional. Like that was the most successul intentional comedy in the whole show. Is like the fucking scene where they're like, "This is the best crust I've ever had." This even got this fluffy white stuff in the middle. Have you ever had crust like this? It'll blow your mind, because like they're so impoverished that they don't know any. Like it's like next level poverty to the point where like they've never seen crust before. Like they don't know what bread is.
They've never seen bread.
Yeah, she doesn't know what bread is. She just knows what crust is. And then like this bread that comes with all this fluffy stuff. It's great. It's the best crust I've ever had.
She's like, you don't know what bread is?
Yeah, and like the show has several jokes like that throughout the show, where it's just like a running gag.
The mineral water one, which is great.
The mineral water, the penny. There's a bunch of fantastic little moments where I'm like, this character just keeps really getting me to laugh.
The only unfortunate part is that character is just a portmanteau of their Kill la Kill character, which is the same character. What's her name? Mako. If you look up Mako, it's the exact, like, it's just bowl haircut, very loud and boisterous, is the, like, it's a comedic side character.
Oh wow, it does look like a similar character.
It's the same character, dude.
Yep, that's actually pretty similar.
I don't want to be extra mean, but I think it might be voiced by the same person.
It's just a straight up like cameo basically at that point.
Yeah. Hold on.
But you introduce these bears and you're just having fun with them, and specifically they it's like a criminal gambling ring sort of situation where like the games are supposed to be rigged and people bet in specific directions, and like the mafia is trying to run how the betting works and everything, but unexpectedly this bear team keeps winning and it's fucking up all these like illicit deals that are supposed to be happening. So they're like their coach is getting their ass kicked on a daily basis, because they're not supposed to be winning. But here is one of the more distressing parts of the season of how they handle race, is that they established that he was like one of those types of figures that was like, oh, it's like the equivalent of like when you have like,
he was the Babe Ruth, basically.
Yeah, well, it's like the equivalent of like when you have like the first like black baseball player or something, and everyone treats them like shit, and it's this big like it's this big type of moment that you'll make movie after movie after about how like celebrating this big moment and this like progress that was made and the adversity they face and whatnot. But like he gets bullied by everyone for being a beastman, and then he fucking massacres them. He's like a mass murderer, and like I gotta say, if that's what happened to like the first black baseball player, people treated him really poorly, and then he like killed 30 people. That would complicate the discourse. That would really fuck up the whole thing a bit. Where you're like,
yeah.
Shit. On one hand, that wasn't nice,
really
but on the other
choice.
hand, apparently the part it's like what people talk about when they talk about like how X-Men is a flawed metaphor because the X-Men are hyper dangerous people that actually genuinely do have superpowers. So using them in analog for like any kind of oppressed group is iffy, because the whole point of oppressed groups is often that they're not actually particularly different from everyone else, and like it's largely like a fictionalized like thing that they're going after them for, as opposed to like Magneto.
About like minorities magnetoing the wall, the border wall. Like we're not worried that, you know, like
so like the iffy thing about X-Men's universe is that being against them is more justified because of the things they keep, like the atrocities they keep doing throughout the timeline of X-Men, even if it's just like the bad people and all that. Like it's just the fact that like, oh, that's why people are afraid of X-Men. And like in this one, it's like, oh, that's why people are afraid of Beastmen, because he just massacred everyone. That's a normal person can't just kill like a dozen people with their bare hands when they get angry. Like that's a lot to take in, and it messes with the messaging a bit.
It's also weird because it's like they wanted this character to, in terms of the plot, they wanted this character to have a backstory that justified their actions, but also to give them like a redeeming arc or whatever.
And they just handle it so sloppily.
They handle it so sloppily, but the character is a reference to the coach from Boxing Joe. Like it's just a homage character. Like that's the exact personality, is the boxing coach who would rig the matches so that Joe would lose, but they would both get a payout for it. And eventually Joe's like, no, I don't want to rig matches anymore. I want to win matches. He's like, no, don't do that. It's going to get me fucking beat up.
This is a storyline that was also in Redline.
This is a normal story. This is because Boxing Joe is an iconic anime that a lot of people watched as a kid and went, that's really good. And so they just keep borrowing that one character, but everyone puts it in weird situations like this where it's like, great. But also the character itself is supposed to be unredeemable. That's the point. Yeah. Like so it's, and I don't know, it's just, it feels weird to have this character, you give them a sympathetic backstory, and then so you give them a sympathetic backstory, but then you play up their current situation in comedic fashion, where like he's only getting beat up because the team continues to lose due to Michiru, who's winning who's winning all the team, because the rest of the teammates are throwing, and she's the only one that's saving the team and winning them the games.
Because she's apparently so her Tanuki powers make her like a star pitcher. And once again, we're gonna throw all this out the window immediately. But like it's like one episode, this is her story arc, is she's gonna like lead a baseball team to victory. And for me, and the highlight of the episode, and maybe the entire show, was just the killer animals. The final team they face off against is called the Killer Animals, and they're not only are they just a fucking joy on screen, but they're like a different art style from the rest of the show. Yeah. Like they're drawn completely differently from the rest of the show. They all remind me of what is that mascot anime where that mascot has a revolver and it's a wolf. Oh, because they all remind me of the art style of that character's design.
Gilnpier or something like that. I can't pronounce.
There we go.
Glipnir. There you go.
Glipnir. Like you have like the fucking like, you have like the coyote or wolf or whatever that's just like drooling with like the muzzle you put on dangerous dogs over his face, and his eyes are all like cuckoo, like Looney Tunes, where they have multiple rings that are in a different number of rings per eye, and the eyelids are, the pupils are like different sizes and shit, and they're like wielding like spike bats in a baseball game and stuff. It's just fucking, and they'll have superpower, they'll have super attacks. Like he'll like swing his bat so hard that he hits the ball, and then his bat explodes and all the shards go at the pitcher because it's all this trick about murdering the enemy team and stuff. And I'm just like, this whole team is just a joy. Like once it's like if this game just leaned in, if this whole show just leaned into fucking being crazy, it'd kind of be more fun than the self-serious like racism plot they go for, because this episode was so much fun.
Could you imagine how funny it would have been if Ogami was forced to be on the team too? Where like he's like using his nose to sniff like what way they're gonna pitch or something, and she like
His
throws a
pheromones
specific
change
way.
whenever he throws a fastball.
Yeah,
Some
like
hot
you could have
bullshit.
so much stupid fun with this, or like Ogami clearly being immortal, so he takes the hits for these killer things, but he's okay. Like
This is
there's
like
so
a
much
show
fun
that
you
would
could
be
have.
better if it was dumber. I want the show to be stupid because it wasn't dumb enough, but it was too
what's
dumb for what it
confusing,
wanted to be.
Is like Trigger isn't. Okay.
God.
Trigger isn't a company that I look to see well thought out, super serious messages in their anime. They're not. They try.
Fools.
Like Kill la Kill does it too, where they try to say something, and it's like, okay, that's cute, that's quaint, you're free to do that, but God, you guys just aren't good at it. Could you just have fun? Just go nuts. And it's so much more fun when they're just being silly and cartoonish. Like even the beginning when you're watching the flamingos fighting the bears, it's hilarious. Like the flamingos throw knives out of their feathers, just like
just casually.
What the fuck?
There's suddenly just a bear just pin cushioned with knives, and he just goes,
and he just falls over
like cartoonishly. It's the best
great.
episode of this whole show. It's so fun. Like I might watch it again at some point. We got to go a little faster because they were like an hour and a half in.
That's true.
Shit.
But we're halfway there.
Yeah, we got to go a bit faster. So what happens is the Church of the White Wolf shows up, which it's hard to it's a little hard to unpack. Apparently there's an entire religion built around the White Wolf, but they weren't in Anima City, and people weren't even sure about the group existing or how big it was, which leads to like world building questions of like how many other places are safe for animal people if like the Animal City people
forest?
were just like they come in on boats, and I'm like, where do they get that many boats, and how'd they all navigate via those boats? Like it wasn't like a big boat, it was a bunch of it was like 100 like consumer grade boats basically.
We skipped over. Oh no, you're right. Never mind. Sorry.
I'm just kind of going faster because some of the stuff just doesn't matter necessarily as much. But but there's like main plot.
I was thinking of the next episode, but there is also the fact that these boats came in and somehow passed immigration without any issue, because this is Japan. You just sailed into another country.
These boats just show up. They don't explain where they were previously or where they got the boats, or like there kind of is a floating question of like, is there a bunch of other Anima cities all over the world basically?
Yeah, does every country have an Anima City?
Yeah, because it felt like this was the one place where really rare beastmen all flee to. But then you have this staggering population that just comes to them by sea suddenly halfway through the season. You're like, wait, I misinterpreted how the world works here, and it's kind of because you're not telling me. But they just show up. They all worship the White Wolf, which they apparently were already doing before they happened to then get a person who could then pretend to be the White Wolf.
Yeah.
Because this organization seems to have been around for years, whereas their White Wolf is somebody who is Michiru's friend who just became a beast like a month ago or something. So like
literally a month ago.
They just had somebody that can shapeshift into the White Wolf as like an impersonator drop in their lap right before they happened to plan to go to Anima City, the place where the whole plot has to happen. That were like the evil villain's plan kind of depends on just happening to have the White Wolf show up, even though that seems to have been a coincidence that the White Wolf showed up.
No, like now remember it's even bigger brained that the cult is actually made by the main villain.
Oh yeah, the main villain turns out to be behind every single plot element of the entire show, like Moriarty. Even if it doesn't make sense, there's a lot to take in there.
So that Keith explains why they showed up out of nowhere, because it was all according to Kikaku.
It's all according, yeah. So everyone worships the White Wolf apparently, which keeps getting thrown around, and this whole time you're losing your mind a little bit because you're like, the White Wolf's right there. We can all see him.
Yeah, by this point, you're kind of like now getting really annoyed that they're not addressing the big fucking White Wolf in the room.
Yeah, and importantly, they established this blonde-haired, blue-eyed human character that's apparently running everything, and he runs the hospital, and he has ties to the mayor, and he's doing research, and like over time he claims to be doing research to help the two characters that are humans that became beastmen and so on, and he's a lot to take in. But let's see, Albatross guy gets established. It's not really important, is it?
No. Pinga isn't really important, though. Pinga does bring up two really concerning issues, which is one, he mentions that he lost a lot of friends during the war, which is like, excuse me.
He said he lost his friends because when beastmen got equal rights with humans, quote unquote, which obviously didn't actually happen, but on paper I guess it maybe did. They started enforcing borders and airspace, and they started shooting down all of his friends when they would cross into airspace uninvited, even though they're migrating albatrosses, which world building questions are established there for sure that aren't going to go anywhere. But not a ton happens specific to that episode besides just us talking about Alan Silvasta as the blonde haired blue eyed guy.
Yeah, there's also
who talks like the villain the entire show.
There's also a really obvious he does talk like a fucking villain.
Like in in English, the voice actor is immediately like, oh, he's the bad guy. Gotcha.
Oh, in the Japanese, he doesn't sound as obvious, but he is very like, he does speak in a manner that comes off as arrogant, like he's better, like he looks down on them clearly, but he's not like,
he's arrogant and smug, but he also sounds like he's controlling everything.
Yes. But the only important thing about the albatross is that it teaches Michiru how to fly, in a really vague sense, because he explains to her that like to fly you have to sense the wind.
Yeah,
and then
it's the last. It's like the last time they establish how she got a power.
Yeah,
because they show her learn stretchy power, and it's usually when she really needs something, and then she flies with the albatross, and then she really needs to fly later, so she just suddenly flies. And then from that point on, it just starts manifesting. Like, they won't really show an episode where she learns a power from that point on. She'll just suddenly be like, I'm a chameleon now, I'm a wolf now, and it'll just kind of happen a few times from then on out. They kind of just go rapid fire.
She just suddenly has... Well, they need abilities. They don't have time to pick a character.
We can get to the rest a little faster, because the first half was all super episodic, but the second half is just the plot now.
But yeah, by the way, the cult was really obvious. There was like no question that the cult was going to be forced to stay there at any point. They also bring up a really dumb point of like Michiru and her friend go and meet the mayor, and they have like a confrontation at the end where Michiru's like, I did this for you. Why are you like being a bitch about this? And like, why are you literally trying to go through with this cult thing? I thought we were trying to like cure ourselves. It's like, no, I want to be an idol.
Nazuna is the most immediately unlikable character in the entire show.
Not only is she unlikable, the show goes, oh fuck, but she is likable, guys. We promise.
The show like forgives her for no reason, but there's no reconciliation. There are several scenes that are like surprisingly well written where she's like gaslighting the protagonist, and it's really cruel and horrible, and I'm like, oh my fucking god, this is an incredibly toxic relationship. Run.
Oh yes.
And you expect the storyline to be like, oh, Michiru's gonna realize that her friend has changed, or maybe was always manipulative, and she's gonna move on with her life and all of this guilting. But instead they just drop that character trait of her, and Nazuna kind of just stops doing that after a bit, and then they're like best buds, and they're like saying stuff and doing things in sync with each other, like they're best friends. And I'm like, I don't like what this show said. I don't like how this show just like had her power through it and stick with this toxic relationship, and then gets really rewarded for doing so. It's like, no, you're supposed to realize that you need to drop these people because she's horrible.
There is the one line. So what really bothers me is that I feel like someone in the writing room must have whispered a sweet nothing, because they say this line about Michiru being, or her friend says this line about Michiru being like, oh, you're too bullheaded. You just run into things. You don't think about stuff. And you don't grab any context for a situation before you try to solve the situation. And it's like, yeah, I agree with that. She does kind of she literally snuck into a facility, broke a piece of machinery in the assumption you got kidnapped again. And at no point asked you, hey, are you okay? Like, I get that.
But you, of course, find out that she was always right.
Yeah, but then you see that there's a scene later on where she says the exact fucking same thing to Ogami, who's doing the exact same, right. Who's also in the right, but he's also doing like a crazy, like irrational behavior thing. And she says the thing to him, but he just jumps out the window and runs away. And I was like, there's no fucking learning point. Like Michiru didn't go like, oh no, that's what I do.
Oh no,
shit.
I've been poisoned by my gaslighting garbage friend that I don't know what to move beyond.
She just watches as Ogami runs away from the confrontation, and she's like, okay. And then the plot just whole point gets dropped, and it's like, why did you gaslight your fucking friend then? You literally did this awful thing, which I thought was to set up a lesson, and then then Michiru herself does the same gaslighting to Ogami, and then no one follows through with their damn gaslighting. Like, fuck.
So the big important thing that happens around here is that the rhino guy from the opening scene, or sorry, from the hospital bombing storyline, he's in jail and gets met with by the leader of the cult, and then he hulks the fuck out into this giant super rhino that's just taking dudes out, which leads to one of my like, oh fuck, I'm surprised they went there moments where I never paused and went back to see for sure or whatever, but I swear there's a scene where Ogami is just like a pulp. Like he's just a twitching mass of gross flesh, because the rhino's just destroying him. And there's a part where he catches the rhino's fist with his arm, and that's supposed to be the big anime moment where he just like beats him because he's superpowered and whatnot. But then he like his arm spaghettifies because it gets obliterated, and you see it like heal and whip back into place. And it's like, like his whole arm's like flailing, and it's like a fucking wacky wave inflatable arm tube man shit.
Yeah,
it's distressing.
It's like he punches the rhino's fist, and they do this anime meet, and the rhino just goes poof, and like grabs his wrist and snaps his whole arm, and then he just like takes it away and goes like, and it's like
those perfect scenes from like Harry Potter and Deadpool where you just have like a spaghetti arm, and it's just like and like later on he's just getting pummeled after getting stabbed all the way through too. Like he gets stabbed through the chest by the horn, and there's a giant hole in his chest. He's like, "Go, I'm fine," which he is because he's magic. But then he just gets pummeled into the fucking terrain until he's a twitching mass of gore. And I'm like, Jesus Christ, I wasn't expecting this show to quite go there with this. But the important thing is that the religious leader met with the rhino guy, and then suddenly rhino guy hulks out and so on, and he's dealt with and so on. But then later in the show, a horse guy is getting conned by the mink, and he suddenly goes full on like berserk horse and goes into it like straight up from berserk. He just hulks out all giant too, and you're like, oh, weird. We have two cases that's going on now. And so here's one of my biggest issues with the entire show, is that the blonde-haired, blue-eyed guy explains that the beastmen just genetically as a people are just these horrible, like beast, like
ticking time bombs.
They're all ticking time bombs. Yeah, he says that if they hit an agitated enough state, they'll just hulk out like this. Which
also point out, he doesn't say stress. Remember that when he mentions this, he doesn't say it's because of stress. He says it's because of agitation, or it's like it's like agitation or something. They use some flowery word to not just come out and say they just stress.
They just said stress in English, and they talked about like it's like
really?
Territorial. Like all these people are supposed to live in different places. They've all been mashed together in this one place, and it's seen as infringing on their territory. So they're getting stressed out by the existence of each other. Which I'm like, I don't know. The chicken and the koala seem pretty happy married to each other, so I feel like kind of full of shit. Also, this city's existed for like 10 years, and apparently this has never been seen before, where people just hulk out all of a sudden. So in my head, I'm like, okay, I see. The villain guy, he's a segregationist, and he's a piece of garbage, and he's arguing in favor of ethno-states. But that's fine, because he's the villain, and he's full of shit. Obviously, he's just like attacking these people and drugging them and making them hulk out with his crazy pharmaceutical company and shit. Because
there's already an ethno-state. They already have to live in their own fucking city because they're not allowed in the main city.
Yeah,
like,
but I'm saying
want?
The show starts bringing up this like ethno-state idea.
Yeah,
but it's from the villain.
Yeah, the idea that every species
I'm like, okay, he's
be...
gonna be proven wrong, and it's really obvious if you're reading it this way that they must have dosed the first guy because the cult leader meets with him and then mysteriously he's an evil villain now. And maybe they got the horse off screen and we'll find out that happened later or whatever, because there's only 2 data points so far. He makes the argument, they're like, haven't you seen how they're just at each other's throats at any second? And it flashes back to like one time at like the bank or airport or whatever the fuck that place was.
It was the immigration office.
Where like 2 guys got in a fight and turned into beasts for a moment, which is the only time that's happened in the whole show, basically. And so when I talked before about stuff,
you can count the Rabbit Town where the people like were ready to fight.
They talked about the
just
idea
because she showed up,
but they didn't. But there was no fight in that moment. It was just the idea of like claws out or whatever. But my point is that like when I said before about stuff that they'll just like that they should have established several times to make it seem like a trend so that we can believe it later. This was that. Like they should have established this apparent idea that beasts are just constantly struggling to maintain society because they're always going at each other. Because our only data point is that 2 guys got in a fight once in episode 2, and that's basically it. And here's what's fucked up about this show.
Well, they also do like a flashback to the slums to like infer that the bad living conditions is making them stressed, and I'm like,
even though those are normal in real life.
Yeah, but I was like, I agree that there shouldn't be slums in a technically utopia city for animals. Like, I don't think Zootopia had a slum. Like, it's a weird idea, but sure.
The fucked up thing here is I'm like, okay, he's a villain. He's probably going to do something against beastmen, so he's probably dosing these people to hook them out to either experiment on them or to give them bad press because he's like racist or whatever. But turns out everything he's saying is true. Turns out beastmen are actually freaking out and hulking out on their own, and
they're genetically disposed to
and
this.
I'm like, oh no. So when I said that the show comes in favor of like distressing stuff that gets introduced, and it's the villain that introduces it, but they don't really actually disprove it within their own fiction, and it has a distressing implication for the writing of the show. This is what I'm talking about. The show advocates for ethnostates and never really retracts that because it literally says that this racial minority is just inherently like violent and uncontrollable, and you have to manage them with ethnostates in order to defuse this, because like they and it really in the fiction of the story of the show, it's true. Like in Zootopia they did the exact same thing, but it was an evil villain that was drugging people to make them go berserk, and they uncover that, and it's like, see, that guy's full of shit. And it was like, and like, but in this show, the sheep says the stuff the sheep says, and it's just true, and there is no blueberries, like in Zootopia. Yeah. It's just actually true, and they never take it back. And I'm like, no, you can't do this show. This is
remember, it's even worse than that. The idea is not only that these beastmen are genetically predispositioned to have a wig out function in their genetics.
Which has never happened in 10 years somehow.
Never happened in 10 years somehow.
But it happens like crazy suddenly. And it's not, he's not doing it. That's the the confusing thing.
One, the company the bad man's at has developed a cure for this, aka just wiping the beastmen out. Literally just turning them into humans, which is like the literal pinnacle definition of how we dealt with Native Americans in the US, which is like, if we just force them to be white people, then they'll be white people. Mm-hmm. Like, and the second solution is, thank goodness that half human, half animal girl showed up, because her blood is actually the cure to this problem.
In a show that's
equally creepy.
In a show that straight up introduces the Holocaust, the blonde-haired, blue-eyed character is a eugenicist.
The purest of eugenicists.
And the show kind of proves him right within the fiction, and it's like, no. This is super worrying.
The weird thing, the really weird part is that they They do technically also, they very quickly backtrack at the last few seconds of the show. They're like, well, all beastmen have this problem. Even the pure blood have this problem, you know, like, because remember at the very end when he's about to like literally fucking beam his mouth off, like, holy shit, dude,
he was gonna Godzilla him.
He was gonna Godzilla in his mouth.
The best part of the Bryan Cranston Godzilla movie is when the Godzilla like does the breath straight down the mouth of the enemy thing and just decapitates him. Like he's about to do that.
What a solid kill. Yeah, because he's about to do that, then the purebred like gets to a stressful enough level that he starts having the problem. Yeah. But
rewinding, like the villain's evil plan is to bring in Michiru's Silver Wolf impersonating friend to do an idol concert where that then ends in a confession that she's actually been human this whole time, which they know about. So multiple characters.
Only Boris knows about it.
No. I mean, like, what pisses me off is that Nazuna explains this to Michiru, and Michiru knows this, and they just accept this surface level explanation that somehow all these beastmen finding out that their religious icon was secretly human the whole time will calm them.
Oh yeah. Like somehow they're gonna just be super stoked about it. They say it like 3 times,
and everyone like agrees with that idea, and it's like. Well, immediately I'm like, what? No, it's gonna make them all Hulk out. Like they're all gonna fucking crack immediately, and that's the evil guy's plan. But no, and it's like,
Ogami's the only one who immediately is like, okay,
no one
time to murder
through
all
the
of
actions
you.
of what it would do to people psychologically to find that out, that their god is false, basically. Like, what the fuck? Like, and it's not like all the ingredients here are wrong. It's not that they don't know about the hulking out and what causes it. And they surely should understand what the implication is of this action. They're just not putting 2 and 2 together at all because they just trusted someone that explained it badly to them and didn't justify it at all. It's like, of course this will freak them out. You know that them getting stressed makes them go into Hulk mode and they'll murder each other. And you should be able to tell that tearing down their religion would probably stress them out, and doing it to all of them in one stadium would probably stress the fuck out of them. But it's like, nah, it'll be fine. Like, no one's questioning it at all, and I'm like, what the fuck is wrong with all of the main characters in this show? But yeah, it all happens. It stresses them all out. Crazy beast man hulking out. Crazy shit starts happening. There's strange plot points that come up, like the fact that apparently Ogami's howl calms everyone and makes them all howl back, and that's how you stop them from all murdering each other. And it doesn't matter what species they are. Like the chickens howl, and the gophers howl, and everyone howls. The bear girl howls. But we have one of the worst scenes of the entire show is that the blonde guy starts giving his villain speech. And it has to work overtime because it has to establish the entire plot of the show within the last 20 minutes of its entire runtime, basically.
Yeah, it has to justify this whole fucking
And then
nonsense.
He transforms into a wolf, which is like he's like Ogami, but with a human face.
And he basically looks like one of the Cats characters came to life.
Yes, he's horrifying. His whole body is wolf, and his head is wolf with wolf ears and hair all around the perimeter of his head. But his face is just a fleshy, human exposed face, unchanged. Yeah. Almost like they didn't know how to draw a second wolf color that would be separable from Ogami somehow. But then while he's continuing to give his villain speech, he transforms into a 3-headed golden wolf, like from Godzilla.
He turns into Cerberus.
Yeah, and all 3 all 3 heads speak in different voices, and all take turns giving the speech.
Yeah, they all speak in different voices, but they're his voice, but just in different tones. Which is
he's just
really
doing
weird.
3 voices. The one voice actor does 3 voices.
He's just doing 3 different voices.
And across from
himself.
him, Ogami is also in his super ultra like Zoid mode, because he's also in Silver Wolf mode. So they're all like quadrupeds, and they're facing each other down. And Ogami
look like
is
Giganta
just
Pokemon. That's what they look like.
They look like Pokemon Sword and Shield, but like different.
Yeah.
Like they look like those two.
They're just
I don't remember the names
position
anymore.
ready to fight, and they're just standing there
they're
immobile, and
they're Gigamax Pokemon standing across from each other in the arena, waiting for the story to let them fight, and they're standing perfectly still while the gold three-headed wolf monologues for like 5 minutes about his eugenicist plans and how he's the only pureblood and everyone else is a mutt and he's gonna wipe them all out and so on. And then he just Kamehamehas Yagami, who has just been standing there the whole time, and one-shots him and leaves. Like that's what I said before when I said there's a fight that just has a monologue for 3 minutes and then one attack and then it's over. Yagami just stands perfectly still and gets one shot, and that was the whole fight. And I'm like losing my fucking mind.
When you complained about it on Twitter, I had just finished the final episode. I was like, oh no, Keith's not gonna be happy with this at all. I was like, they just wiped this fool out with one shot after a fucking whole monologue.
Like I was complaining about the fight in the first episode, and you'd seen the way worse one in the finale. But then Yagami,
like, you're not gonna like this.
But then Yagami fights him, and it goes like you expect, where he's like, "No, only a pureblood could do this. You can't do the super howl or whatever." And then Yagami's like, "Actually, I can do the super thing, whatever." And then he defeats him unexpectedly, air quotes, the way that every anime like this ends. Anime like this ends.
Anima.
I said anima. And he's about to kill him, but then he looks at Michiru and he's like, "No, I'll actually spare him." And then he he forces him to bite him.
I wasn't too sure about. That's a weird it's a weird conclusion to come to, where it's like, but I want to keep this Nazi alive. It's like,
it's a weird sparing moment. It's like
weird.
It's
also,
weird.
Not only that, he reveals himself to be the ancestor of the guy who killed all of his village.
Yeah,
like he's
literally
like,
the ancestor of the
I'm
people.
actually the survivor, and he's like, I'm gonna fucking kill you. And
which is a
like,
detail
no, that's out of control. Don't do that.
That's a detail that's revealed long before he ever exposes himself as the villain. He just he just volunteers the fact that he's the ancestor of the guy that killed Ogami's family. Yeah. But as a slight rewind, when I think it was around the time he found out that information, Ogami hulks out, which I didn't even think he could do, because I thought that I thought everyone hulking out was basically them turning into his spirit wolf form but not being able to control it. But he also has a hulk out form that's separate from his spirit wolf form. And when he was hulking out, he attacked Michiru, which they used as a cheap cliffhanger on the penultimate episode. And him biting Michiru apparently cured him of that Hulk mode.
Her blood,
her hybrid blood apparently fixes it. So we have a cure now for the hulking. But it has the coolest visual in the show, or one of them, which is that he melts.
Yeah,
it's so
melts.
fucking cool.
It's cool as
he's
fuck.
He's a giant Hulk monster, and he just fucking melts. And then there's just like a naked wolf humanoid form Ogami in the bottom of that.
Side note about that.
He has magic regenerating clothes until he doesn't.
Yes.
The first two times his clothes come back, and then after that, never again.
So, yeah, the first two times that he goes into wolf form, his clothes just come back. But he can only do wolf form by taking off his neck belt. Yeah, so he has like a belt around his neck. And so he takes the collar off, and then he transforms. But he doesn't take his fucking clothes off, so they just get ripped.
Yeah, he just explodes out of them.
But then he comes back and he puts the collar back on, but his clothes are already back. And it's like, what the fuck? And then the end of the show, he just doesn't have his collar on.
Yeah,
which is really confusing.
It's just not a physical transformation, because every time he turns back to a normal wolf, he's just sitting there he's just naked. Like he doesn't have anything on his neck. At first I was like, oh, that's a neat detail, because he got his throat was cut when he was murdered. Yeah. And so the scar of when he was murdered is the part he reveals when he transforms. But then it seems completely unrelated to the transformation, because they just stopped doing it.
It is arbitrary to the transformation.
So many things just get dropped like this, like nobody proofread the script or something. Like they just set up a thing and then they just forget about that. I was like, oh. It's like I wasn't that attached to that idea, but it seemed like you were establishing that was how this worked, and then you just stopped doing it that way. And that's like how 30 things in the show work.
Though to be fair, Eugenics Man also has the same problem, where he just was back in a suit again. And I was like, wow, that's interesting. well form-fitted suit just
it's
came
like
back.
I could accept them just transforming back into clothed people if it wasn't for the fact that Ogami keeps transforming back into a naked wolf and then then getting clothes back over time or something. Like there's a part where he transforms. There's a part where he's naked
34 without some nudging.
Yeah. There's a part where he's just naked, and then there's a part where he transforms back, and they're looking over a hole into the ground, and he's just wearing slacks, and he's holding a jacket under his arm. I'm like, where'd those clothes come from? I still don't understand. But for the entire climax, he's just naked, and he never gets clothes again throughout the whole climax. I'm like, I don't know how the clothes work. I'm so confused. But I rewound to that because that's what the finale was, is the fact that Ogami forces the villain to bite him, and Ogami's already been infected by the cure via Michiru, so it goes then to the villain, and now the villain doesn't Hulk out, which seems like a mistake, because it seems like that would only cure his bad hulking, and it wouldn't cure his Cerberus form being a thing he can still do. So you think he'd still be able to defeat you. Like, you think he'd just come back.
He could still do his Cerberus form, yeah. He just gives up voluntarily because, like, he lost the pure blood argument somehow, but he still, like, didn't. Yeah, I don't know. It's weird.
I also don't love this element of the show.
Mixed blood saves the day?
I kind of liked when people just had literal animal powers. Like, they just turn into animals, and that was, like, their whole thing. But when you have two characters that can transform however the fuck they feel like, because they're shapeshifters, then you have two characters that are like the god characters that turn into laser spewing wolf forms, and I'm like,
well, remember they explain that the only way to do that is by, like, basically birthing them or baptizing them in the blood of 1,000 fucking beastmen, which is already its own problem. You have to, like, jump over where that. Like, Ogami made sense. He was thrown in a burial pit, like a mass grave of a bunch of dead
Did they explain that's
animals.
How that works?
Yes. They specifically said the only reason Ogami turned that way is because he was thrown in a mass grave of 1,000 dead beastmen. And the only reason that he can transform is because he just fucking straight killed 1,000 people and just dunked in their blood.
There's a lot of bloodline genetic stuff that goes on in this show.
I was like, sir, you just admitted to, like, literally murdering 1,000 people. That's crazy.
There's like bloodborne stuff going on in this show, where like he becomes a superhero because he was thrown into a mass grave.
Yeah,
which is like a lot to take in. Like,
it's like, all right, but
oh boy,
it's not good.
And then it just kind of ends, and Michiru is like, I'm gonna stay here for some reason. Fuck my parents, I guess. I just live here now, not at my home.
What upsets me more is that Michiru can literally fly and can transform into a human, which means her stupid fucking ass could literally just go home, turn into a human, give her parents a fucking hug once in a while, and then fly the fuck back home. Like, God. She doesn't even have to be at risk of poachers because she can just fucking fly.
You can commute.
She could probably turn into a fucking fish if she wanted to. Like, God damn it.
There's things to take in about this whole thing. It's there's a lot of characters we didn't even touch on that are like,
it also
their own messes in some cases.
It upsets me. Okay, so the thing that really upsets me is that Michiru is such a cool fucking concept. There's a lot that you could do with that character, and the intro of the show kind of fucking blue balls you with it. Because they show her, like, they show this, cute little scene where it's both of them, both Ogami and Michiru's shadows running towards a thing. And then Michiru goes out of frame and you see her shapeshift different forms. Like, one's a horse legs, and she has, like, bird wings, and you're like, oh, that's cool. She can, like, turn into other animals. That's great. And they're like, nah, she just can fly. They're like, oh.
Mostly, okay. Yeah. She sniffs and once.
Sometimes she has cheetah legs.
She camouflages once. But she mostly just uses the mobility powers.
It's just like these really lame changes where I was like, you could do cool shit. Like, what if she also turned into a silver wolf and fought her friend who was pretending to be, and being like, that's how she exposes her.
She just ends the show with 4 wolves. But no, both of the friends get kind of sidelined. Even though one of them's the main character.
I'll be
in the
honest.
finale.
I thought that was going to be the ending. I thought both her friend and I thought Michiru and Nezu were going to turn into wolf, like the same silver wolf, and make the 3-headed beam like the purebred. I thought
like they're gonna morph into
No, not morph together. Like they're just all
they're
three
all
of them are gonna
merge
stand
like
next to
Voltron.
each other. Yeah, they're just gonna merge their howls together into one beam that overcomes the pure blood. I thought that's what was gonna happen because that sounds fucking cool. Instead, it was like Okami just going like, "No, give me a second. I'll learn how to do it." And I was like, "What? You're just gonna figure it out? It's like a genetic thing? What the fuck is this?" And he's like,
Yeah, with Ogami, it's straight up just like he couldn't beat him, but then he fights him again when nothing has changed, and he beat him.
Yeah.
He just round 2 he wins. For round 1 he loses because he was just too busy standing still in a Pokemon battle instead of fighting.
Yeah, I was like, oh no, he got the super effective move off first. Shit, nailed it. So like, the other battle, I did a full restore. We're gonna try it again. I'm gonna do the fight. I'm gonna do the beam first. Now it's super effective against you. Yeah.
We gotta cut this off probably. We've been going for a while.
It's like a psychic battle in Pokemon. Like whoever does psychic first wins, and you're like, oh shit.
Yeah. All right, we reached the 2-hour mark, so it's about time to close it off. But yeah, it's
not good. Just watch Zootopia.
It's not great. There's one really good episode and a few other good moments, but there's some oof. I feel like the more I think about it, the more I'll additionally be troubled by the subtext of what it's saying. In a lot of the story,
I don't know
because there's some I haven't. There's some I think I just
say.
haven't processed yet, and I'm just like, this might be bad too.
I thought it was trying to say some weird shit about like, yeah, Japan, just accept mixed blood. They're the future like solution to your xenophobia, and I was like, okay.
It does feel like in this universe, the ultimate solution is just for everyone to get animal powers. And then
it feels kind of weird.
That's where the season ends. They have a way to turn everyone into a human animal hybrid that can just shapeshift at will and also has special powers and seemingly no downsides because they're also cured from the Hulk mode.
Sorry, we also didn't explain the most important part, which is the only reason that Michiru can transform is because she got animal blood transfused into her. That's all it takes. On accident.
Yeah.
And so all it takes is animal blood, and then everyone can be a beastman, which is a really important thing.
That was one of the handful. In this universe, just being exposed to anybody else's blood genetically transforms you, apparently. Because there's like 4 different cases of that happening in different forms throughout the show. It's like, because there's the mass grave, there's how Michiru got her power, there's how Michiru cures Ogami.
There has to be,
and there's also the serum that's supposed to fix people in the first place. Whatever.
Yeah, there has. I bet you like give it like a.
You just genetically rewrite people on the fly.
Give it a few months. Someone's going to come out with a really long 2-hour commentary about how this is an entire allegory for blood mixing, and this is why like Japan has to move forward with something, or else they're all going to die out because they can't just keep staying in their own little small bubble or something stupid and excuse the entire idiocracy that is this bad mishmash plot, which is like just about how eugenics is sometimes okay. Like there's some excuses for eugenics.
Was the villain of this show Lovecraft? He was always afraid of. He was in all of his writing. It's like half the subtext of half his stories is like races mixing with each other. Like when you hear about Innsmouth and the fish people and everything, it's always like this terrifying idea that like races are going to breed with each other and monsters will come out. And it's like, Lovecraft, you got some issues.
Yeah, well,
they're not going to age well. They're not going to age well, which is a problem because all your shit's going to get really popular for the other reasons, and they're all going to have to dance around the creepy parts you keep writing in these. We got to go. But this is this was BNA. It was fun to talk about. It was kind of a wreck to watch.
This poor show.
See you guys next time.
Goodbye.